Hello everyone, welcome to Poetry Tea and Chat from Wiltshire Libraries with me, Peter. This is actually my second attempt at broadcasting Poetry Tea and Chat today on the 27th of June 2023. Apologies to anyone who attempted to listen to the earlier broadcast where there was no sound. I'm going to give it a go again and see if I can and get it right this time round. So I hope you'll all be able to hear me this time. I have a book recommendation first of all to give you all, and it is a book called I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud and Other Poems You Half Remember from School, and it's a collection of poems edited by Sampson, and it's, as the title says, lots of poems that you'll remember from your time at school probably, such as the title I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud from Wordsworth's The Daffodils. But what's interesting is that Anna Sampson, the editor, has found out all sorts of information about the poems that you might have been slightly resentful of having to learn at school. But it's got some interesting gossip about the poets who wrote the poems, and some salacious stories about them, which is quite interesting. But also it's just a really good excuse to revisit some classics. And sometimes I find that I don't go back to poems that I've heard so many times before, and sometimes forget just how good they are. So the first poem that I thought I would do today, and all the poems that I'm going to do have got a sort of summary theme of one sort or another, although now because of my issues with the sound earlier on, this is going out in a summer's evening rather than a summer's day. The first poem I'm going to do is the classic Shakespeare sonnet, Sonnet 18, which is the Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day sonnet. And if I wasn't terrified, even after doing a dress rehearsal in which no one could hear me, unless you can lip read, in which case you could see that I read it perfectly, I probably could read Sonnet 18, at least the first section, without looking at the text, because I've heard it so many times and read it so many times. But what's interesting is when you go back to these poems, you find that there's more there than you think, and particularly I think with Shakespeare, he's quite underrated because obviously his plays are the most famous thing that he did. I don't think his poems were particularly known in his lifetime, but they've come to prominence since. But yeah, particularly the second half, I think the words are just fantastic. It's a really lovely piece of poetry, so I think it bears reading again, even though you may be very familiar with it. This is Sonnet 18 by Willam Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou oust. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. That was Willam Shakespeare, Sonnet 18. The famous Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, with the line the darling buds of May that the books and then the TV series took. So moving swiftly on to another classic, by another classic poet, Percy Bysshe Shelley. This is Shelley's To a Skylark, or at least extracts from it. Hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it pourest thy full heart in profuse strains of unpremeditated art. Higher still and higher from the earth thou springest, like a cloud of fire. The blue deep thou wingest, and singing still dost soar, and soaring ever singest. In the golden lightning of the sunken sun, o'er which clouds are brightening, thou dost float and run like an unbodied joy whose race is just begun. the pale purple even, melts around thy flight. Like a star of heaven in the broad daylight, thou art unseen, but yet I hear thy shrill delight. Teach me half the gladness that thy brain must know. Such harmonious madness from my lips would flow. The world should listen then, as I am listening now. That's To a Skylark, or extracts from it by Shelley. So I went to an interesting event down on the Somerset Levels earlier this month. It's called the Green Scythe Fair, and there were some skylarks flying over the meadows there. If you've never been before, it's a very eccentric, typically sort of weird British village activity. It's near the village of Muchelney on the Somerset Levels, and it's a competitive scything competition where they have a meadow in the middle of it with stalls around the outside, and people attempt to mow a strip of grass as quickly as they can. So if you've never been to the Green Scythe Fair at Muchelney on the Somerset Levels, do go down and give it a go. But it made me think of another poem with a summer's theme by Robert Frost called Mowing, and so that's what I'm going to read you now. There was never a sound beside the wood but one, and that was my long scythe whispering to the ground. What was it? It whispered. I knew not well myself. Perhaps it was something about the heat of the sun, something perhaps about the lack of sound, and that was why it whispered and did not speak. It was no dream of the gift of idle hours, or easy gold at the hand of fay or elf. Anything more than the truth would have seemed too weak to the earnest love that laid the swale in rows. No, not without feeble pointed spikes of flowers, pale orchises, and scared a bright green snake. The fact is the sweetest dream that labour knows, my long scythe whispered and left the hay to make. So that was Mowing by Robert Frost. Another book recommendation. I very much like the writing of Patrick Leigh Fermor, who's a travel writer, but also he had quite an exciting early life. He was in SOE, the Special Operations Executive, during the Second World War, and was parachuted in behind German lines to help the Cretan partisans on the Greek island of Crete. And his life, which is very long, he lived well into his 90s, is summarised in an excellent biography by Artemis Cooper called Patrick Leigh Fermor, An Adventure. That's the front cover of it, if I can hold it up so that you can see. There we go. Patrick Leigh Fermor, An Adventure by Artemis Cooper. And the reason that came to mind was that during his travels in Greece after the war, he wrote a travel book called Mani about his travels in Greece. He was sat on the waterfront with some friends on a day that he described. It was so hot in the summer sun that the stones on the quayside were giving off heat like a casserole dish with the lid left off after it had just come out of the oven. And he was so hot that he and his friends picked up the table and walked out into the water, set the table down, and then sat round it up to their waists in water, with the tabletop just above the level of the water. And a very sort of stoic but bemused waiter waded out to them and served them their food. And so that made me think of sun and summer. But yeah, if you ever want to read any of his other travel books, they're really good. But yeah, it's just his life in general, just reading about his life. He was a fascinating character. There was a film with Dirk Bogarde called Ill Met by Moonlight that was based on something that he did during the war when he was living in Crete with the Cretan resistance, where they kidnapped a German general. And so yeah, the film Ill Met by Moonlight was based on something that he did, but also his travel books. That's Patrick Leigh Fermor, his biography by Artemis Cooper. So thinking of Englishmen abroad in the heat, one of my favourite poems about heat and summer is one by D.H. Lawrence called Snake. and this was written when D.H. Lawrence was living in Sicily. And yeah, this is just some extracts from it, but just listen to some of the language that he uses in this poem to really give the impression of a snake. A snake came to my water trough on a hot day, and I in pyjamas for the heat to drink there. In the deep, strange scented shade of the great dark carob tree, I came down the steps with my pitcher, and must stand and wait, for there he was at the trough before me. He reached down from a fissure in the earth wall in the gloom, and trailed his yellow-brown slackness soft-bellied down over the edge of the stone trough, and rested his throat upon the stone bottom, and where the water had dripped from the tap in a small clearness, he sipped with his straight mouth, softly drank through his straight gums into his slack long body silently. Someone was before me at my water trough, and I like a second comer waiting. He lifted his head from his drinking as cattle do, and looked at me vaguely as drinking cattle do, and flicked his two-forked tongue from his lips, and mused a moment, and stooped and drank a little more, being earth-brown, earth-golden from the burning bowels of the earth, on the day of Sicilian July, with Etna smoking. The voice of my education said to me, he must be killed, for in Sicily the black snakes are innocent, the gold are venomous. And voices in me said, if you were a man, you would take a stick and break him now, and finish him off. But must I confess how I liked him, how glad I was he had come like a guest in quiet to drink at my water trough, and depart peaceful, pacified and thankless into the burning bowels of this earth. So that's extracts from Snake by D.H. Lawrence. It also made me think the description of the golden snake of the recent series of Springwatch, where on the BBC, where Chris Packham and Michaela Strachan have been down on the shores of Poole Harbour in the Arne Nature Reserve, where they saw all 6 of the UK's reptiles, including the adder, which is of course a golden snake, and our only venomous snake. It also made me laugh, or made me smile to myself, about him reaching down from a fissure in the earth wall in the gloom and trailed his long yellow-brown slackness soft-bellied down. As you can see, I am back in my poetry cave, particularly now as the light's fading outside. It really does look like I too am emerging from a fissure in the earth wall in the gloom. So apologies for that. Right. Another poem, I think. Let's move to England and have a famous English poem about the summer sun and a hot day on a train, waiting on a train. This is Adlestrop by Edward Thomas. Yes, I remember Adlestrop, the name, because one afternoon of heat the express train drew up there unwontedly. It was late June. The steam hissed. Someone cleared his throat. No one left and no one came on the bare platform. What I saw was Adlestrop, only the name. And willows, willow herb and grass and meadowsweet and haycocks dry. No whit less still and lonely fair than the high cloudlets in the sky. And for that minute a blackbird sang. Close by and round him mistier, farther and farther, all the birds of Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire. That was Adlestrop by Edward Thomas, written in 1914, just before the outbreak of the First World War, which tragically he was killed in. But just remembering being stopped in a station on a hot day and just looking out of the window at the sign and wondering about it. A lovely image of a summer's day. Right, okay, I think I will just give you one more little bit of information about something that's happening in libraries over the summer, and then we will finish on a quick last poem. So there's lots of things happening in Wiltshire libraries all the time, and I would always recommend you going into your local library to find out what is happening next. All sorts of events happening throughout the year. But during the summer, we run one particular event for primary school aged children called the Summer Reading Challenge. So it's for children aged 4 to 11 who are at primary school. And it's starting in a couple of weeks' time on the 15th of July. And it runs all the way through till the 9th of September. And children can sign up from the 15th of July all the way through until the end of the summer. You can join at any time during the summer from the 15th of July onwards. And the challenge is always the same. It's to see if you can read 6 books, any books of your choice from the library over the summer. Come and tell us about it, and we will give you free stuff. You get a certificate. I've got a copy of the certificate here. Here it is. This year's challenge is called Ready, Set, Read. They're always on different themes each year, but you can read any books you like. It doesn't have to be a book that's on the theme. And if you manage to read 6, you get that certificate I just held up and a medal, if you're aged between 4 and 11. So do encourage any children you know of that age to come down and use their local library during the summer to do that. It's a fun way of just rewarding them for reading and getting them interested in reading. And you get some stickers as well, some of which are scratch and sniff, so you know what's not to like. So that's the Summer Reading Challenge for children, and I thought I would finish with a poem about a child written by Robert Louis Stevenson, the author of Treasure Island. This is called Bed in Summer, and it's a lovely poem written from the perspective of a child who doesn't see why they should have to go to bed when it's still light outside. Bed in Summer. In winter, I get up at night and dress by yellow candlelight. In summer, quite the other way. I have to go to bed by day. I have to go to bed and see the birds still hopping on the tree, or hear the grown-up people's feet still going past me in the street. And does it not seem hard to you, when all the sky is clear and blue, and I should like so much to play, to have to go to bed by day? So that was Bed in Summer by Robert Louis Stevenson. I hope you've enjoyed this short and sweet second take at the Poetry Tea and Chat podcast from Wiltshire Libraries. Next month in July, Jess will be doing it from Devises Library. So I hope you can tune in and listen to her. But if you want to watch any of the previous episodes, then we do archive those on our YouTube channel. Wiltshire Library's YouTube channel, that is. So until next time, when you tune into Poetry Tea and Chat, thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to finish my tea. Thank you and goodbye.